Hello World History AP students. Tonight we're going to be looking at writing in world history in your AP course. Press the wrong button. Let's present. So there are three major types of essays that you're going to be writing in AP World History, and we'll talk about those in just a minute, but this video is mainly going to be working on comparative questions. So keep that in mind. We'll also have videos later on as we get into document-based questions and CCOTs. So quick review, the AP test essay section. You'll have 130 minutes to write 3 essays. The document-based question will have one option, and the other 2 will have multiple options, and you'll choose one from each. That means you have about 43 minutes and 20 seconds per essay. There are 3 types, like I said: document-based questions, where you'll get documents; change and continuity over time questions; and the ones we're focused on today, which are comparative questions. Why are we focusing on comparative questions? Because at the end of our lesson today, you will see your first test essay. So let's talk about comparative questions. Simply put, they ask what is the same and what is different about regions of the world. You are analyzing similarities and differences. Even if it only says compare, you're going to be doing both. This is the 3rd essay which you'll write on your test, so it's natural to be tired. Before you get to this one, stretch a little bit, take a deep breath, muster your energy, and then dominate. So what's our process? Well, the first thing you do when you get this question is try to organize your essay. And I would say this should be a process that takes about 5 minutes. You will do this process tonight after our video. You often have a choice of areas to compare, so choose the ones that you know best. You'll jot down a few notes about each topic and decide what information and details you need for your essay. Right now, let's look at this question for the sake of the video, though your question will be different. Compare and contrast the dynamics of trade in 2 of the following regions for the periods mentioned. It gives you a choice of periods to compare and contrast. Keep in mind that you're talking about trade, not about trade and religion, or not just about religion, or not about technology, but just the dynamics of trade. You'll have to choose 2 of these regions to compare and contrast. The next thing to think about after you've planned out your essay is, do you have a thesis? Thesis statements do not need to be sophisticated, but they do need to cover the entire question. It's okay to have a thesis of more than 1 sentence, remember that, but don't go overboard. Don't write 10 or 11 sentences and expect it to be your thesis. That is not concise. You want your thesis to be 1 sentence if you can, 2, maybe 3 sentences. Especially with the compare and contrast, 2 sentences might work fine. But remember, the amount of sentences does not make a good thesis. The good thesis answers the whole question. So take a look at the 2 theses below and pause your video to decide which is better. The thesis on the bottom, trade dynamics in the Roman Empire centered around the Mediterranean Sea. In China, however, they used rivers for trade. Both societies used water routes to transport goods. That thesis statement is better than the one above, because in Maya culture, the elites used a form of hieroglyphic writing to keep records, while elites in India used a complex method of knot tying called kipo in order to keep records, does not address the original question of trade. Additionally, while there is a difference here in the first thesis, the second thesis gives both a difference and similarity, and also it answers the question in dealing with trade. Both do a good job of choosing 2 societies, but only one answers the question. The next thing to think about, once you have your thesis and your introduction written, do you address all parts of the question? So let's look at the question again. If you had this question on the test, did you address the dynamics of trade in 2 areas? Did you provide accurate similarities? And did you provide accurate differences? Even if the question just says compare, as I have changed it to here, versus compare and contrast, remember that compare for AP exam means to provide similarities and differences. Now you would write. You might want to consider these questions. Do you use enough facts to support your thesis? Do you make a solid comparison between the societies? Do you analyze the reasons for similarities and differences? And do you go beyond these basic requirements and give extra facts and extra support to support your thesis? If you do this and you can answer yes to all these questions, then you have written a solid comparative essay. Don't worry, we're going to practice these. We have all year. So some final notes. I'm not going to read these all to you, but just keep in mind there are do's and don'ts. Whereas we focused on the do's, let's talk about some of the don'ts here. Don't rewrite your complete essay. That's going to take too much time. Each essay you need to have, it needs to go down on the paper. You need to have a solid idea of what you're doing. And it needs to stay on the paper as best you can. Secondly, don't favor one region over another. Don't write all about Mesopotamia if it's a question about Mesopotamia and Egypt, or vice versa. Don't mention facts that aren't focused. If we're talking about trade, don't somehow mention religion off to the side if it does not have a bearing on trade. And don't discuss each area in isolation. You don't want a paragraph on Egypt and then a paragraph on Mesopotamia, or a paragraph on the Romans and a paragraph on the Chinese. You want to incorporate them together. You want to write paragraphs that discuss both areas together. That makes for a stronger essay. So what are you going to do tonight? You're going to start planning. I want you to spend 5 minutes organizing an essay on the topic to the right. You may take up to 10 minutes, but if you go over 10 minutes, you're doing it wrong. Then, I want you to write a thesis statement, which addresses all parts of the question. This is the thesis, this is the question that you're going to write for your first test. Compare the religious beliefs and practices of 2 of the following regions up to 600 BCE. That's the unit we're covering. Comparing the religious beliefs of Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus River Valley, ancient China, or Mycenaean Greece. Those are your options. You'll look at those, you'll choose the 2 you know best, and you can start planning out your essay. Again, when you come into class tomorrow, you should have a short 5-minute organization, not a full outline, and a thesis statement. Get started. Have a good night, and I will walk you through this. Don't worry.